Something happened today where a country that totally disrespected us called with some very, very important news. And one of my generals came in. They said, you know, I have to tell you, a year ago, they would have never done that. It was a great sign of respect. You'll probably be hearing about it over the next few days. But this is a country that did not respect us. This is a country that respects us now. The world is starting to respect us again, believe me.
That was President Trump last night giving a preview of a big story breaking today. An American woman and her Canadian husband held hostage for 5 years in Afghanistan by a notably violent Taliban group. It's called the Haqqani Network. They've been freed. They and their 3 children have been let go. Now, the 3 children were born in captivity. The Trump administration had worked with the Pakistani government there to free them. Now, in June, the Trump administration also had secured the release of Otto Warmbier from North Korea after nearly 18 months of imprisonment. Otto Warmbier did die 6 days later after being tortured by the North Korean government. Last spring, the Trump administration had also secured the release of Egyptian-American aid worker Aya Hijazi from Egypt. Let's bring in former CIA Covert Operations officer and the president of Diligence LLC. Look who's here. He's Mike Baker.
Hey.
Good to see you, Mike.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
What do you think of President Trump getting cooperation from these governments in these efforts?
Well, I mean, it's obviously good. Anytime we can get a U.S. citizen returned from a difficult situation, that's a positive thing. This latest release, the American woman, Caitlin Coleman, and her husband, who's a Canadian, it has people scratching their heads. It's an interesting story, and it was done. The release was done with the assistance of the Pakistani government. And obviously, Pakistan has had a variety of issues related to terrorism and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban over the years. The Canadian husband in this case is the former brother-in-law. This is an interesting story. The former brother-in-law of an individual named Omar Khadr, who was held in Guantanamo Bay for 10 years. And people may remember that earlier this year, the Canadian government apologized to him and gave him a settlement over $8 million US. So there's some backstory here to this couple. This couple they were in Wardak province in Afghanistan in 2012 backpacking, and she was pregnant. Let me just repeat that. They were backpacking in Afghanistan in 2012. She was pregnant when they were picked up and held hostage. Yeah. And they've been held hostage for the past 5 years. It's good to get them back, but sometimes bad things happen if you allow your situation to allow for such.
Yeah, now the husband apparently is afraid he himself is going to be stuck in Gitmo, so he's worried about that. But let's talk about how this stacks up with President Obama's work. I mean, President Obama did work on getting Cuba to free 53 Cuban political prisoners. He got American Alan Gross released from a Cuban prisoner after 5 years in exchange for 3 Cuban spies being released, right?
Right. Yeah. The Obama administration, stands by all the various things they did, including emptying out Guantanamo Bay as much as they could leading up to the election and the inauguration of President Trump.
Can we just stay on that, Mike, for a second? I want your reaction to what you just said, because here's, to your point, here's more of Obama's record besides his work in Cuba. He swapped a Taliban prisoner, Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, now on trial for deserting his Army unit in Afghanistan in exchange for 5 Taliban members, one of which reportedly returned to terror. Bergdahl is set to enter a plea this Monday in his court-martial case for desertion. Also, President Obama commuted the 35-year sentence of Army Private Chelsea Manning, previously known as Bradley Manning. He was court-martialed for leaking a treasure trove of U.S. military intelligence secrets. President Obama also released, to Mike Baker's point, 161 terrorists from Guantanamo Bay since January 2009. Now, 1 out of 7 of them, estimated, have either returned to the terrorist fight or support terror groups. This is according to the Defense Intelligence Agency. And then President Obama also sent $1.7 billion in a secret all-cash payment to Iran to settle a decades-old claim. It was delivered the same day Iran agreed to release 4 U.S. prisoners. Your thoughts here, Mike?
Yeah, well, typically if you have a large pallet of cash on one side and you have some hostages on the other, and you trade places. That's called paying a ransom, usually in most places. So that was directly a cash for hostages deal, no matter what the previous administration would like to say. There are efforts to empty out Guantanamo. Look, most numbers, most studies have the recidivism rate at about 30%, meaning roughly 1/3 of those who are released, whether from Guantanamo or from other detention, end up back on the battlefield or back with their terrorist buddies. So that's not a good thing. The Bo Bergdahl trade was awful. They swapped 5 Taliban prisoners, 2 of whom were very senior within that organization. And, Bo Bergdahl, I'm sorry if this offends anybody, but he deserted. Okay. He walked off his post. Yeah. And people died as a result of that. U.S. soldiers died in the ensuing time looking for him or being involved in foot patrols out there in that region. So, yeah, they don't have a lot to crow about from the previous administration here.
Thank you, Mike Baker. Always good to see you. Thanks for coming on.